Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. Let's take a look at today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 8 important articles for a detailed analysis. If you guys are benefiting from our initiative, do support us with your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now, before we start with the discussion of these articles, we have a few important announcements. Unacademy has been conducting an All India Prelims mock test to help you prepare for the upcoming Prelims exam. Yesterday, the second mock test was conducted on the Unacademy app, and today we are going to discuss this entire paper right here on our YouTube channel. So do join us live today at 1 p.m. where we are going to discuss the questions that had appeared in the second mock test. And also please note, as part of Conquer Prelims crash course, which is taking place on the Unacademy app and as well as on our YouTube channel, we have the regular scheduled classes today. Mukesh sir and Asta ma'am will be respectively taking up their classes. Mukesh sir will be taking up Environment Ecology classes on the Unacademy app at 6 p.m. and Asta ma'am will be discussing government schemes on our YouTube channel at 7:30 p.m. But apart from that, we have something special for you today. Today, Shyam sir is going to take an extended session under Conquer Prelims. Today at 12 p.m. on the Unacademy app, Shyam sir is going to discuss few current affairs and static topics that are important for Indian economy for your upcoming prelims. So do watch these sessions live. You can join our Telegram channel where we share the links of all these sessions. You just have to click on them to watch these sessions live. So with this, let's begin with the analysis of today's The Hindu by looking at this important editorial from page number 6. This editorial is related to disaster management under GS paper 3. The editorial is focused on building fires and fire safety, which has become a pressing topic in India in the recent days. I'm sure many of you would have come across these disturbing news reports from Rajkot, Delhi, and even in few other parts of India, where over the last few days there have been these deadly building fire incidents where several people have lost their lives. In Gujarat, in Rajkot, a gaming center caught fire. In Delhi, a nursing home caught fire. And what is unfortunate is that many children have been killed in these fire incidents. So building fires are essentially a man-made disaster. It is a man-made disaster, almost entirely preventable. With the right steps, under preparedness, mitigation, and preventive steps, we can prevent such disasters from occurring. But unfortunately in India, these incidents keep recurring, particularly every year during the summer season. During heat wave conditions, especially in northern parts of India, there are many such hazards which turn into a disaster, leading to large-scale loss of life, loss of property as well. And we need to focus on how we can manage these incidents, how we can prevent such fires through better enforcement of rules and regulations, how we can deal with these crisis situations and save more lives during a disaster. How can we recover from such disasters and ensure that it doesn't repeat again? That is the whole focus under disaster management when it comes to fire safety and building fires. So these tragic incidents which have hit India, where there has been large-scale loss of life, including that of young children, it shakes the conscience of every citizen. It raises questions regarding what the governments are doing when it comes to fire safety. Because through the right fire safety norms, it is possible that most of these incidents can be prevented. If not all, at least majority of such building fire incidents can be prevented. And accidentally, if there were any such fire accidents, we can deal with them better. There could be better mitigation strategies which can minimize the injuries and deaths that occur during such incidents. But due to the poor regulations, the lack of preparedness, and the poor enforcement of the existing rules and regulations. We are witnessing such deadly disasters every single year, especially during the heat wave season. It's not just in hospitals or shopping malls or other buildings, even in factories, industries, we often see that during the summer months, fire accidents go up by a significant number, especially in those industries where high temperature, high pressure conditions exist. For example, in industries like metallurgical industries, where boilers, furnaces are used, in power plants, frequent industrial fires are witnessed, which also leads to large-scale loss of life, causes economic and property loss as well. So we need to focus on fire safety norms. We need to discuss what is the hazard and vulnerability associated with building fires. What kind of disaster management measures have we put in place? What are the guidelines that exist? Right? And we need to evaluate this through a critical perspective. You can expect a mains question based on this. Later, I'll give you a mains question and we'll briefly discuss an answer as well so that you can start preparing for such topics right from the beginning. So fire is definitely a hazard, be it a natural forest fire or a wildfire, or even such industrial fires or building fire incidents. They definitely represent a hazard. Hazard is a potential state which has the ability to turn into a disaster. A hazard can turn into a disaster when there is large-scale loss of human life, when there is loss of property, there is economic damage, or when there is environmental ecological damage. So such fire incidents, which occur quite regularly and frequently during the summer months, they make India very, very vulnerable. Because as you know, India is a densely populated country, especially our urban areas. India's cities and towns are densely populated with tightly packed buildings. Most buildings don't follow the building codes that are in place. Local authorities, especially the municipal bodies which are responsible for enforcement, they fail in their responsibility to enforce these building standards, which turns each hazard incident into a deadly disaster. According to the National Crime Records Bureau, the NCRB, it brings out a report called Accidental Deaths and Suicides in India report. According to this report, there have been thousands of such fire incidents in the country every single year. And more than 7,000 people are getting killed in the country. This is only with regard to building fires. It's a reference to the building fire incidents, which includes industrial fires as well. So essentially, because of such a man-made disaster, more than 7,000 people are losing their lives in the country every single year. This is as per the data from 2022. The numbers would have increased. According to the estimates for 2023, more than 11,500 building fire incidents were reported in the country. And anywhere between 8,000 to 9,000 people might have lost their lives. So this is a significant cost. The human cost is significantly higher. And of course, this comes with an economic cost as well. Now, the worst part is that these disasters can be avoided. As I said, it's possible to prevent most of these building fires if we follow the basic steps in disaster management. See, under disaster management, there are three basic steps. Rather, there are three essential steps which form a cycle. So if you implement the DM cycle, the disaster management cycle, and mainstream the three essential steps as part of regular governance, day-to-day governance, it is possible to deal more effectively with most of the disasters, especially with such preventable disasters. So under the disaster management cycle, there are three essential steps that comes under three phases: pre-disaster, during disaster, and post-disaster. These are the three essential phases under the disaster management cycle. In pre-disaster phase, you focus on planning, you focus on preparedness, so that you can prevent the disaster if possible, or at least you can mitigate the impact of the disaster. That is, you can reduce the impact of the disaster. So during planning and preparedness in the pre-disaster phase, you try to understand the nature of the hazard. Studies would be needed, data, statistics would be needed to understand the hazard and vulnerability of our country to a particular disaster, and based on that, you can come out with a strategy. You can come out with laws, regulations, policies, and plan accordingly so that some of the disasters can be prevented entirely. Building fires, for example, they can be prevented if the building code is strictly enforced at the grassroots level. Let's say buildings use better construction material, which can retard or deter fires. Let's say fire safety norms are implemented in every building. A proper fire exit, smoke detectors and smoke alarms and water sprinklers, improved fire services from the state government. So if these measures are put in place, fires can be prevented, or at least the impact can be reduced, can be mitigated, thus saving lives. So the overall damage caused by such building fires can be managed. It can be prevented or at least mitigated. But this requires better planning, better preparedness in the pre-disaster phase. During disaster, you need better response. Your emergency response has to be spot on. See, disasters are not entirely avoidable, right? Especially a disaster like building fire. It is supposed to happen, right? It could accidentally occur as well, despite the best possible measures being taken. So what do you do? How do you react? How do you respond when the disaster strikes? This is where your fire services, right? Your emergency preparedness, emergency response plays a big role. So state governments, which are mainly responsible for fire services, they are facing critical shortages, be it shortage of funds, shortage of personnel in the fire department, or the shortage of equipment and resources. This has crippled the ability of fire services, the fire department, to effectively deal with the fires that break out. So we need to focus on improving our response during the disaster. And then finally, how do you recover from the impact of the disaster? What do you do post-disaster? Right? You need to compensate the victims for the losses they have suffered, the injured and the dead, right? Their families would deserve compensation. Plus, what measures will you take to prevent such incidents from recurring? So this falls under the post-disaster management category. Now this approach, this systematic, holistic approach in disaster management, it applies for any disaster. These three phases, pre-disaster, during and post-disaster management, it applies for every single hazard. But when it comes to building fires in India, especially the industrial fires and urban fires, the main culprit is the poor regulations and policies that we have and the lack of enforcement of the existing guidelines. It's not that we don't have any rules or regulations. We have the National Building Code. The National Building Code of India, which was brought out in 2016 by the Bureau of Indian Standards. Please make a note of this. There can be a prelims question as well based on this point. The BIS has brought out the National Building Code of India in 2016, which provides for mandatory fire safety protocols to be implemented. But however, the drawback is that this document, this regulatory policy, it's not enforceable by the center. It is only recommendatory in nature because fire services is a state subject. Fire services is a state subject as per the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, and the local municipal bodies, they have the mandate, they have the authority to enforce these building codes and building standards. Now, if you look at earthquakes, for example, the disaster associated with earthquake can be largely mitigated if you follow the building codes and standards. If the buildings are earthquake resistant, earthquake proof, obviously the losses can be minimized. So in India, we do have the building codes and standards, but the problem lies with enforcement at the grassroots level, at the local level, that is at the municipality level. Your city corporations, your municipal bodies, right? They are failing to enforce these regulatory norms, these building codes. And the center is also pretty helpless here, as fire services, primarily with regard to building fires, happens to be a state subject. The center can only come out with model policies and regulatory or recommendatory codes, but final enforcement is left to the municipal bodies and the will of the state governments. So this is one critical shortcoming as far as our preparedness is concerned. We are failing in the very first stage of disaster management, right? Even though the policies exist with regard to the building material, the construction material to be used, the protocols and safety norms like availability of a fire exit, fire extinguishers, smoke detectors and fire alarms and water sprinklers, etc. All these are mandated for buildings in the country, but they are not enforced properly at the municipal level. This leads to such incidents, and eventually the country pays the price for it. Now, if you look at the fire safety norms in India, there is a general disregard and negligence as well by the public, by the citizens, and as well as by the stakeholders, be it the state level authorities, the local city level authorities, even at the level of the central government to an extent. There is a certain disregard with regard to fire safety norms. There have been many audits of government buildings, and the audit report shows that government buildings themselves are not following the fire safety norms and protocols. Plus, you have the real estate industry, the real estate mafia, which often violates the regulations, doesn't focus on the fire safety norms. Right, there happens to be a corrupt nexus as well sometimes between the real estate industry and the local municipal authorities, the local politicians. So this could lead to bypassing of the safety regulations, and eventually when the disaster occurs, people will pay the price for it. For example, if you visit the website of the Director General of Fire Services, which is under the Home Ministry, the Ministry of Home Affairs, it actually paints a picture about the status of fire services in the country. The Director General of Fire Services under the MHA states that fire services in the country are not well organized. They are not well equipped. They don't have adequate resources. They face a critical funding shortage. Now, this is something that has been admitted by the government itself. So it shows the level of preparedness that we have when it comes to emergency fire services in the country. The NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, right, which is responsible for disaster management, it had recommended a higher allocation of funds to strengthen the fire services in the country. During the 13th Finance Commission, NDMA had sought additional funds. It had sought around 7,000 crore rupees to revamp the fire emergency services in the country. But the 13th Finance Commission had stated that 7,000 crore rupees is not sufficient. In order to transform our fire services at the grassroots level, these funds are not enough, and in fact 13th Finance Commission had urged the government to set aside at least 90,000 crore rupees over the decade to ensure that our fire services are strengthened to meet with the challenges. Because today we are also dealing with global warming, extreme weather events, which means we are going to witness more heat waves, more deadly wildfires as well. And these could add to incidents of urban, industrial fire and building fires. So keeping this in mind, it's very important to strengthen our fire services and emergency response. 13th Finance Commission had noted that the funds sought by NDMA was not sufficient. 13th Finance Commission had recommended at least 90,000 at the municipality level, but this has never happened. It has never translated into action. So today, if you look at the fire stations in India or the number of fire personnel in the country, we are facing a critical shortage. According to data provided by the Ministry of Home Affairs and the concerned state governments, India has just 3,300 odd fire stations. This is grossly inadequate for a country which is of the size of India. For such a large country with such a large population, having just 3,300 odd fire stations is grossly inadequate. The fire personnel, if you look at the numbers, you will be shocked. India has only 55,000 firefighting personnel. But do you know what the requirement is? Studies have suggested that the country needs more than 500,000 firefighters. That is the minimum recommended number. This was, I think, in 2013. A report which was submitted to the parliament, it had pointed out that at least 5,60,000 firefighting personnel are needed in the country. This was in 2013. So imagine how the requirement would have increased by now. And we barely have 55,000 firefighting personnel in the nation, in our country. Right? So this is a critical shortage of staff. So there is a human resource shortage. Plus they lack the resources, they lack the funds. They lack the right equipment, the right vehicles, the right technology. See, today fire management has become quite sophisticated, from usage of drones to advanced miniature vehicles and more efficient fire extinguishers. A lot of advanced technology has come into the domain, which is being used in the developed countries. In India, apart from few fire stations and few state governments, many of them haven't taken these modernization efforts. Many times fire services face a difficulty in reaching the fire site. They still rely on these large trucks, which can never navigate through a city's traffic. And you all know how notorious traffic conditions are in Indian cities. In the congested localities, the fire trucks can never reach the actual site. So there are different technologies, different resources available today which need to be deployed. But the fire departments at the state level lack the funds, they lack the resources, they lack the personnel as well. In fact, 15th Finance Commission had recommended that 12.5% of all budgetary allocation should be set towards NDRF, SDRF funds. This was to provide more financial allocation to deal with all kinds of disasters. So when it comes to fire-related disasters, the center has recently allocated 5,000 crore rupees, and it has pushed the state governments as well to bring in around 1,400 crore rupees into the State Disaster Response Fund. But these funds are grossly inadequate. As stated by 13th Finance Commission, somewhere around 6,000 to 7,000 crore rupees is not at all sufficient to revamp and modernize the fire services in the country. So this is another major challenge that India is dealing with. Next, of course, is with enforcement of the building codes and standards that we were discussing about. From the construction material to the safety norms and protocols, be it the nature of electrical wiring or the way air conditioners are installed in buildings, because these are all fire hazards, especially during summer months, right? Most fires occur due to electrical short circuits. So if the right wiring standards are not followed, if good quality wires are not used, if the electrical equipment is faulty, if the building itself doesn't have adequate fire exits, if the fire exit is not accessible, right? Or if smoke alarms and water sprinkler systems are not installed, that too in commercial buildings, that is where the risk increases. The disaster risk goes up significantly. So what we need is a strict enforcement of the existing regulations and guidelines, especially the National Building Code, which is recommendatory in nature, should become enforceable, right? It should be mandatorily enforced, and for that we may need a legal backing. Since fire services are a state subject, the National Building Code is only recommendatory as of now. It's only a recommendation to the state governments. So that is not sufficient. There should be a legal statutory backing to enforce this on the ground through the municipal bodies. So that is one corrective action which can be taken. And the other corrective action would be to allocate more funds, more resources, ensure that we modernize and transform our fire services. So these are the basic steps necessary to deal with these deadly incidents. So now let's take a look at a mains practice question, right? It gives you an idea as to what kind of questions can be asked by UPSC in the mains exam. This question says, fire safety rules in all states, including the National Building Code, are often ignored due to the absence of uniform safety legislation and the NBC being a recommendatory document. Evaluate. So basically there is an opening statement, an open-ended statement which has been given that talks about the disregard for fire safety in India and how NBC is not enforceable. In this context, you're asked to evaluate fire safety in the country. So how do you begin your answer? Start with an introduction. Start with an introduction where you highlight some recent deadly incidents of building fire. that shows that you are in touch with current affairs, you are in touch with the recent incidents. Mention the fire in Delhi, the fire in Rajkot, or any such incident that you have come across in the newspaper. Use that as a reference to highlight the hazard and vulnerability of India. See, always ensure that your answer has a proper structure. UPSC expects this from the mains aspirants who are writing the mains examination. The answer should have a proper structure, right? You need not, you should not deviate from the given question. You should not add any unnecessary points. Because first of all, you have a time constraint. Second, there is a strict word limit, right? You can't exceed the word limit by a big number. That could lead to a negative marking as well, where you might lose marks. So within the given word limit, and by keeping the time limit in mind, you need to hit the answer on its head, right from the first line, right? Instead of writing something which is not relevant for the question, you have to hit the question on its head by starting out with some recent incidents, 1 or 2 examples, and highlight the hazard and vulnerability of India. That should be your first step. Present some data as well, as I did, to highlight the cost that the country is facing because of these incidents. So give a couple of examples and point out, according to NCRB report, more than 7,000 people are losing their lives because of building fires in the country. So you're basically highlighting the gravity of the problem right in the introduction. Then start with the body. In the body, you have to do justice to the given question. The question is saying that fire safety rules are disregarded. That is the first statement which is being brought up in the question. So here you can discuss the disregard in the country for fire safety norms. Talk about the statement from the Director General of Fire Services from the Ministry of Home Affairs. How the Director General admits that we don't have a holistic approach towards fire management. Discuss the lack of preparedness. Discuss the failure to implement the regulations at the municipal level. Discuss the lack of resources, the lack of funds, etc. Then talk about the challenges that we are facing with regard to such disasters. You can point out that we do have a national building code, but it's only recommendatory in nature because fire services is a state subject and municipal bodies are failing to enforce them. Talk about how the private real estate industry often violates the fire safety norms in commercial buildings and in residential complexes. So clearly bring out the risks associated with it, the various challenges that we are facing in implementing the existing rules and provisions. So once you do this, finally, talk about the conclusion. Provide a way forward. Suggest a way forward, give a solution. You can suggest that right now there is disregard for fire safety rules because NBC is not enforceable. It has no legal backing. It's only a recommendatory document. So if a legal statutory backing is provided, right, then it becomes enforceable and municipal bodies will be accountable to ensure that the building codes and safety protocols are implemented strictly at the grassroots level. So such suggestions can be provided. Talk about increase in funding for fire services, how we need to modernize our fire emergency services as well. So that essentially will complete your answer. Now let's look at the next article from page number 8. This article is related to the AMRUT scheme. This article provides us a complete overview of the AMRUT scheme. I feel this is another important topic, especially for GS paper 2 under governance. So let's understand what is AMRUT, when was it launched, what is its core objective. Let's discuss the success, the shortcomings of AMRUT so that we have a full overview about this important scheme which has been launched by the Modi government. See, AMRUT stands for Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation. So essentially, it's an initiative focused on urban governance. So it is implemented by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. It is the nodal ministry. This ambitious scheme aimed at urban rejuvenation and transformation was launched in the year 2015. The facts could be very important for your prelims. So in 2015, AMRUT scheme was launched, and in the initial 5 years, around 50,000 crores were allocated by the central government. This is a central sector scheme, meaning the funding is shared between the center and the states. Center brings majority of the funds, but the states and even the respective cities which are part of the scheme are expected to bring in the balance or the remaining funds that are needed. So center provides majority of the funds, the state governments and cities, the concerned cities as well, right? Even they are responsible for raising some financial resources to fund this ambitious urban transformation scheme. Is that clear? So remember the funding structure as well. Center, states and the cities, they are all responsible for raising the required funds. So 500 cities and towns were selected under this program. Those cities and towns with a population of more than 1 lakh, they were selected under the scheme, and there are few priority areas under AMRUT scheme. For example, ensuring that water supply, water management is handled in the most efficient manner possible at the city level, so that there is drinking water availability for the urban population. This is a priority. Providing clean drinking water supply. Managing the water resources in a city, from rejuvenating the groundwater table to conserving the lakes and wetlands and water bodies in urban areas. Essentially, water rejuvenation, conservation, management and supply is the primary focus of AMRUT scheme. It also focuses on sewage management or sewerage management, that is the waste management. Right? It focuses on municipal waste, urban sewage management, because if urban sewage is not scientifically managed, this could not only lead to pollution and environmental impact, it could lead to public health concerns as well. Because when polluted water, right, sewage water from households, from industries, if they are released directly into water bodies, right, it can percolate into the groundwater table, it can bring toxicity into the water bodies and environment, and it can have a deadly impact on the environment, plus it will translate into a public health concern. It can lead to breakout of diseases and various conditions when people are exposed to toxic substances and pollutants. So dealing with sewage, septage management, that is drain management, dealing with stormwater drains, it's a priority under AMRUT. Is that clear? Then it also focuses on creating adequate green spaces and parks and protecting them to deal with air pollution and also to moderate the temperatures in cities and towns. So greening of the cities by conserving the parks, by protecting the open areas and by establishing more green spaces is a priority as well. And finally, promoting non-motorized urban transport. Promoting public transportation and as well as non-motorized urban transport. This not only deals with the problems of mobility and transportation in cities, it will also help in tackling air pollution. So this is the primary purpose of AMRUT scheme. Is that clear? Let me summarize this. Let me repeat the point. UPSC can ask you for a 10-mark question. What is the primary objective of AMRUT scheme? Right? So this scheme launched with the Modi government in 2015 aims at urban rejuvenation and transformation. It's focused on urban governance and urban transformation. The first focus is water supply, drinking water supply. Ensure that clean drinking water is supplied to all the people residing in cities. So this requires effective water management. So from restoration of groundwater table to protection of water bodies, etc. And ensuring that piped tap connections is provided to every household is part of the scheme. Next, sewage management, septage management. Managing the urban sewage, managing the liquid waste which a city is generating to ensure that the environmental impact, the health impact is managed, right? That is a priority under the scheme. Then stormwater drainage. Stormwater drains are critical to deal with urban floods, right? The rainwater is channeled through stormwater drains, and this is what protects cities from urban flooding. Problem is, these stormwater drains are either encroached, right? Encroached by the real estate mafia, where illegal colonies and settlements have come up, or the stormwater drains are blocked. A lot of waste material, construction material, they're all dumped in a very unscientific manner and the municipal authorities don't deal with it. So thus, stormwater drains which are not effectively managed can result in urban flooding. So this is a priority under the scheme. Then maintaining the green spaces and parks to deal with pollution, to provide a clean space, right, to improve the quality of life in cities, to moderate the temperatures in cities. This is a focus. And finally, promoting public transportation, non-motorized urban transport for improving mobility, for tackling air pollution. It's a priority under AMRUT. So this scheme has been rejuvenated even further. A new version of the scheme was launched in 2021. After 5 years of implementation with more than 50,000 crores in funding, the second version, the second edition of AMRUT was launched, called AMRUT 2.0. So the earlier AMRUT mission has been subsumed under the new edition of AMRUT. So under the new edition, there are more ambitious goals which have been set. For example, with regard to water supply, drinking water supply, the goal is to ensure universal coverage to clean drinking water through a functional tap in every household. You might have heard about the Jal Jeevan Abhiyan, under which the Modi government is extending a functional tap connection to every rural household. Similarly, in cities, in urban areas, for every household, a functional tap connection is being extended through AMRUT 2.0 initiative. The goal here is to provide clean drinking water, which has a lot of impact on health, nutrition, etc. Right? Because in urban areas, most of the drinking water that is available, it is polluted, it has a lot of contaminants. So this has a direct bearing on the health and nutrition of our urban population. So ensuring that there is universal access and coverage for drinking clean drinking water in every household through a functional tap is a priority. Next, with regard to sewage and septage management, the goals have been further raised. The goal here is to focus on the circular economy of water, to ensure that wastewater is not just scientifically managed, but it is treated and recycled and reused. So treated sewage water can be reused for various purposes, from cleaning to gardening, etc. So promoting the recycling and reuse of sewage water through scientific septage management is a focus. It's a priority under AMRUT 2.0. And there is focus being provided for public transportation, non-motorized transport through electric vehicles, and as well as rejuvenation of the green spaces and parks and open spaces in urban areas and cities. So essentially the same goals, but with a renewed target. So AMRUT 2.0 is a very ambitious scheme of the central government to achieve rejuvenation and transformation of our urban areas to improve the standard of living, the quality of life in our cities. Now you might ask me, why is this so important? Why are we stressing so much on the scheme and its objectives? See, as of now, almost 36% of India's population resides in urban areas and cities. This is only going to increase further. According to estimates, by 2047, by the middle of this century, nearly 50% of India's population will be residing in cities and urban areas. Is that clear? So this would pose a major challenge with regard to urban governance. As of now, rapid urbanization has already created multiple problems and challenges, from unmanageable traffic to polluted water, polluted air. Right? City residents in the country are already dealing with enormous problems, especially health-related problems. Quality of life is very poor in Indian cities. Standard of living is extremely poor in Indian cities. So the goal here is to improve these facilities in our cities and urban areas, because in the coming years, more than half of our population will be residing in cities and urban areas. See, this is how you can use data, very simple data, to justify your argument while writing a mains answer. A World Bank report says that India would need $840 billion by 2047-2050 to cater to the urban population, because half of the country's population will be residing in cities and urban areas. So that is why schemes like AMRUT are very crucial. But however, even though the scheme has seen some success, there is a success story here. I'll talk about that. But there are many shortcomings as well. There are critical shortcomings in the implementation of AMRUT. So when you're critically analyzing a government scheme, you should look at both sides of the stories. Look at the success being projected by the government, acknowledge the initiative of the government, and at the same time, take a critical view and point out the shortcomings so that the scheme can be made better. So if you look at the success, the government has been able to release more than 80,000 crore rupees in funds in the last few years under AMRUT 2.0. See, AMRUT 2.0, the second edition of AMRUT, it's being implemented from 2021 to 2026. The first phase was implemented from 2015 to 2020, right, with more than 50,000 crores funding. So now in the second phase, for the next 5 years, the center is planning to bring up to 3 lakh crore rupees as investments into urban rejuvenation and transformation. So out of this, more than 80,000 crores has been brought in by the center. States and cities also have raised their share of the funds. So this has led to many successful projects at the city level. Millions of tap connections have been created at household level, providing clean drinking water supply. Groundwater table rejuvenation is being taken up in many cities. Water bodies are being conserved. Green spaces are being created and protected. Public transportation, urban mobility, non-motorized urban mobility is being promoted. There is better efficient sewage management. Sewage treatment plants have been set up. Millions of sewerage connections have been provided for households, especially in urban slums, where a large percentage of urban population resides in. So this is indeed a success of the scheme. It has led to better LED lights to improve mobility and transportation. It has led to introduction of electric buses at the city level. It bring down emissions, tackle air pollution, plus improve mobility and transportation. So these are some of the achievements, the successes. But the biggest shortcoming, according to the writer, is that the scheme is not well structured. It's not well designed. There is a fundamental problem, a structural problem in the design of the AMRUT scheme. Because there is a project-oriented approach. There is a project-oriented approach. Now let me explain why this can be problematic. See, if a project-oriented approach is adopted, focus will be only on specific projects. This will miss the larger picture. The holistic approach is not adopted under AMRUT. When you're dealing with transforming an urban area, you need holistic planning. You need to look at the interconnections between drinking water supply, sewage management, and tackling air pollution and water pollution. These interlinkages are entirely missing. Standalone projects are being taken up, they are being implemented, but the impact is very less. Or sometimes the other areas which are not being focused upon will counteract the positive impact generated by a certain project. Now let's say a green space has been protected and conserved under AMRUT. If a holistic approach is not taken, right, water pollution in the nearby area, poor sewage management could damage the green space that you have created. Then what's the whole point of implementing the project? So that requires holistic planning, a holistic approach, which is entirely missing because it's a project-driven scheme. The focus is on each individual project in every city. There is no holistic, comprehensive approach at the city level. This is one of the strong criticisms against AMRUT. Now see, you already understand the problems being faced in our cities. A Niti Aayog report paints an alarming picture for the coming years that most Indian cities will run out of groundwater. From Delhi to Bengaluru, they will run out of groundwater supply during the peak summer season, and we have already started witnessing this. If you remember, a couple of months ago, Bengaluru and many other cities were facing critical drinking water shortage because groundwater was exhausted. There was no focus on groundwater rejuvenation. Water bodies were not conserved, not protected. Stormwater drains were encroached. So even few rains in the monsoon season, pre-monsoon season, will result in urban flooding in the same cities which were facing water shortage in the dry months. So this is clearly a case of urban mismanagement. So in a country where such serious challenges are present, as far as urban governance is concerned, it's very important to get the structure of the scheme right. The structure is problematic because it is project-oriented. There is no holistic approach, no comprehensive approach for an entire city. So the interlinkages are missed out. So instead of looking at the connections between drinking water, sewage management, environment conservation, pollution management, everything is approached individually, and that too by government entities and private industries. The implementation is led by private companies and industries in collaboration with the government. This is another problem. There is no representation for municipal bodies. There is no grassroots representation, no involvement of the local community at all. Elected representatives at your city corporations, municipal bodies are not even part of the decision making. This is another critical flaw in the structure of AMRUT. If you look at the Apex Committee, the highest decision-making body under AMRUT scheme, it is chaired by the Secretary to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. If you look at the composition of this Apex Committee, it only includes non-elected members. They're all nominated experts, former government officials, industry experts, technical experts. See, bringing experts is good. It brings more expertise and professionalism. But there should be representation for the directly elected representatives. There should be representation for the state and city level authorities, which is entirely missing in the scheme. If you look at the state level bodies, the high-powered committee at the state level that is responsible for implementing AMRUT, it is chaired by the Chief Secretary of the state. And all the nominees in this Apex Committee at the state level, they're all from private industry. They are from think tanks, they are experts in urban planning, they are experts in mobility, transportation, there are real estate representatives, etc. So there is a larger representation for private industries with government officials, bureaucrats, but no representation for the elected representatives. The corporators, the city level, municipal level representatives are missed out. The city corporations, municipal bodies have no representation. Citizens, civil society has no participation. So this is where the structure falls apart. For any such urban rejuvenation scheme to succeed, one, you need a comprehensive city-based approach, right? You can't just focus on individual projects. Next, you need local involvement. You need a participatory approach. You need the participation of the citizens of the city because they know the problems better. They can air their grievances. You need the involvement of the elected representatives at the municipal level, right, who can be held accountable by the people. But if the bodies are comprising only of government officials and private industry representatives and experts, it can never be inclusive. They will never be able to look at the ground picture, right? And they'll never be able to come out with the right solutions for the urban problems that are affecting our cities. So these are some critical shortcomings in AMRUT. It does not empower the local bodies, no representation for elected representatives at the grassroots, and no citizen-centric approach. No involvement of the community and the people at the grassroots level. So these are the major shortcomings. So based on what we have discussed, there can be a mains question under GS paper 2. A question like this can be asked. India's urban areas are in dire need of citizen-centric and grassroots approach to ensure urban rejuvenation and transformation. In the light of this statement, examine the success and shortcomings of AMRUT. So again, focus on the structure of your answer. Before you start writing, spend at least 20-30 seconds in thinking what will be the broad structure of your answer. The moment you read a question, don't jump into answer writing. Always come out with a brief structure and start with a solid introduction. Maybe you can start with the fact that 36% of India's population is residing in cities. This is going to increase to 47% to 50% by the middle of the century. You can say that World Bank has estimated India will need $840 billion in just urban investments to improve urban infrastructure and governance. Right? So present the picture. Or maybe talk about city-specific problems. The water shortage in Bengaluru, urban flooding seen in some cities, the traffic problems in Delhi, Mumbai. Right? Mention these problems, the challenge related to air pollution, water pollution. So basically you're highlighting the challenges, and then in the body, we can discuss what is AMRUT scheme, how does it help. You can talk about AMRUT-I, AMRUT 2.0, what are the core objectives, and what is the success, what's the shortcoming. Right? Maybe you can draw a table, right, and list out 4 or 5 points on the, under the success stories, and maybe 4 or 5 points under shortcomings. Provide a comparison. or you can write in a paragraph format itself. So under the body, you can cover the success and shortcomings, and finally conclude the answer with a way forward. Always provide a way forward to any problem or challenge that you have highlighted. Because eventually, as future bureaucrats and government officials, you will be responsible for solving the same problems, right? So UPSC not only expects you to identify the problems, but also expects solutions from you. So see if you can suggest something on the lines that we have discussed to tackle these challenges with regard to urban transformation. And that completes your answer. Now let's look at the next article from page number 10 related to internal security under GS paper 3. It's a very small article. Let's take a quick look and then we'll head towards the prelim section. This article is related to the policies related to Jammu and Kashmir. See, in Jammu and Kashmir, as you know, the erstwhile state and now the Union Territory has been affected by militancy and insurgency and terrorism, which has been largely sponsored by Pakistan. So if you look at India's broad approach to deal with the challenge of separatism, militancy and terrorism in J&K, we have adopted a security approach from 1980s itself, right? Militancy broke out in J&K in 1987. So since then, India has approached the problem with a focus on two important aspects. One is the security approach and second is the developmental approach. With regard to the security approach, we have implemented AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, that gives few extraordinary powers to the security forces to deal with the threats posed by insurgency and terrorism, right? Because J&K is a disturbed area under the Disturbed Areas Act. So this empowers our security forces. The Indian Army is involved in a lead role as far as counter-insurgency, counter-terrorist operations are concerned. Intelligence agencies like IB and DRAW play a critical role in targeting the terrorist groups and the cross-border support coming in from Pakistan. Right? So all these possible security measures have been undertaken to counter the security threats. But in any conflict zone, you can't solve the internal conflicts purely through a security approach. Be it in the Naxal corridor, be it in the northeast of India, or be it even the Khalistan movement for that matter. When you're tackling any internal security challenges, right, where there is an active conflict zone present, along with the security approach led by your security forces, your intelligence agencies, etc., you need a developmental approach as well. Look at our approach towards Naxalism, right? Our central forces and the state forces target the Naxals. That is the security approach. Plus, there is a developmental approach to acknowledge the grassroots problems, the development divide, the historical neglect of the region, and to provide for better governance. Same with Northeast India. Northeast India has seen multiple insurgencies. Apart from the security approach, there are many developmental initiatives to improve connectivity to Northeast, to provide better infrastructure, to create job opportunities. Right? We even negotiate with the insurgent groups and we have signed many peace agreements. For example, the Mizo Peace Accord, right? The recently signed peace accords with the Bodo groups, the third Bodo Accord. So many such peace agreements have been signed as well, which means the government is not just focused on security operations to deal with internal security problems and internal conflicts. There is another approach, a developmental approach, which also includes an aspect of reconciliation. Governments bring out surrender and rehabilitation policies to encourage the militants to lay down their arms and weapons. Because at the end of the day, those involved in internal conflicts are our own citizens. They might have been misled, brainwashed, radicalized. There might be involvement of cross-border elements like Pakistan or other countries, their intelligence agencies which are sponsoring them. So it is always important, as part of conflict resolution, to provide alternate ways of dealing with the conflict. Apart from the security approach and the developmental initiatives, there should be an opportunity for militants to surrender, to lay down their arms and get some support from the state so that they can be brought back into the mainstream, so that they can receive some compensation, they can maybe get a job from the government and they can be rehabilitated. For example, we have a surrender policy for Naxals. We have surrender policies in Northeast India, where militants can surrender, lay down their arms. The government will not target them unless and until they have not committed heinous crimes. If they have not been involved in rapes, murders, or acts of terrorism, the cases will be withdrawn as well. Governments give them a compensation as well, so that the militant who has surrendered and their family can come back into the mainstream. The government will help them with a house, maybe with a job, so that they can be pulled away from the path of extremism and they can be brought back into the mainstream. So that is one way of dealing with a conflict, right? In J&K as well, we have a surrender policy in place. Previous governments in the 90s and early 2000, when militancy was at its peak, they had introduced a surrender policy where militants who had been misled, who had been taken on the wrong path, if they had a change of mind, they always had the option to come back and surrender, lay down the arms in front of the forces, and in return, the state would rehabilitate them. So this has been the balanced approach of the Indian state in general, irrespective of which party is in power or which government is in power. So recently, there have been some changes that have been done with regard to government jobs in J&K, and this has raised a lot of alarm. It has led to questions as well with regard to the government's approach to deal with insurgency, militancy in J&K. See, as far as government jobs are concerned in Jammu and Kashmir, I told you there is a surrender policy, right? In J&K as well, there is a surrender policy available to the militants. Thousands of militants have surrendered over the last 20-30 years, since 1990s. Many of them have been rehabilitated and some of them have been given government jobs as well, so that they are brought back into the mainstream. So earlier approach was that before giving a government job to anyone in J&K, not just a surrendered militant, to any youth, before they secure a government job, a thorough background check, a security check would be conducted. Now this is mandatory, it is understandable, right? Forget a conflict zone like J&K, even for your regular UPSC civil services exams, right? After you clear the exam, there will be a security check, a background check done by Intelligence Bureau, just to check that whether your credentials add up, just to check and ensure that you don't have any contact with hostile governments, right? Just to ensure that hostile countries and hostile actors are not placing anyone in the government services. So that could become a huge security risk, so that, and that's the reason why in any such critical jobs, there is a thorough background check which is done, which is justifiable as well. In J&K, any youth who is seeking a government job, who is securing a government job, would also have to undergo such a background check by security agencies. So there's no problem with this. But now, recently, Home Minister Amit Shah has said, because J&K is a union territory being directly administered by the center, Amit Shah has said that security agencies are expanding the security check, the background check. Previously, security check would focus only on the concerned youth who's seeking the government job and their immediate family, their parents, their brothers, siblings, etc., just to check that they don't have any contact with militants or terrorists or with Pakistan-sponsored elements, right? That is a justifiable security ground. But now Home Minister Amit Shah has stated that security agencies are carrying out a vertical and horizontal expansion of security checks, meaning even in the extended family, if some faraway relative, some uncle or some cousin, even if they were involved in militancy, this youth might be denied a job. And these checks are now being done both on maternal side and the father side. So this is a very comprehensive background check which is being done. Government says it is necessary to ensure that no youth with any kind of militant ties enters government services. So understandable from government's viewpoint. But regional parties, the local youth, are highly critical of this approach because this will deny the opportunities to them. If some far-off relative, right, was in touch with militants or was a militant himself or herself, if the youth is punished for that, right, who has no connection with that family member, it only increases the resentment, the discontent, and it could actually perpetuate the cycle of violence as well. So many people are criticizing this approach of the Ministry of Home Affairs of expanding the background check, of conducting a much more expansive horizontal and vertical background check where entire family tree is being checked. Even extended families, they may not even be in touch with the extended families, but still, if one of them was involved in militancy of any kind, right, the youth will be denied government jobs. So this is like a double-edged sword, this policy. Government says it is necessary to ensure that no militant families are rewarded in any way. But the local youth, regional parties, and even civil society says that in conflict resolution, right, you need to adopt an accommodative approach when there are surrender policies available for militants from northeast to Naxal corridor to J&K, how can you target the youth, deny them government jobs just because someone in their extended family was involved with militancy? Which is a valid argument as well. So it is a debatable topic. I would like to leave it at that, but that is the development that you need to be aware of. Now coming to the prelim section, we have few small articles today. Let's take a quick look. On page number 12, there's an article referring to the RudraM-II missile, which has been successfully tested by the DRDO. So there can be a basic prelims question here. The RudraM-II, the M is capitalized here. RudraM-II, it is a air-to-surface missile, meaning it is fired through fighter jets. In this case, it was launched from a Sukhoi 30 MKI at integrated test range in Balsor, Chandipur of Odisha. So essentially, it's an air-fired missile fired through fighter jets usually. The target is a ground target, a surface target. So such an air-to-surface missile can be used with deadly impact in case of wars to target enemy ground assets, to target enemy camps, their communication centers, or enemy troops which are moving, which are mobilizing. Right? Entire columns, infantry, battle tank columns can be targeted through such air-to-surface missiles. This is an indigenously developed air-to-surface missile of the DRDO, and it is powered by a solid propellant. It's a solid propelled, indigenously developed air-to-surface missile. Is that clear? Those are the basic details you need to note down. Next, on the same page, there's an article which is relevant for art and culture. The article is referring to the Durga clay idols, which are integral to the Durga festival, right, which is the very cultural identity of the Bengali people, Bengali culture, and it refers to the idol makers who belong to a locality called Kumartuli. Kumartuli is located in North Kolkata, right? Historically, it was part of Calcutta, even under British rule. So since then, this locality, this town, became the residence of all the sculptors and potters. Those artisans who were skilled in pottery, who were having special skills in sculpting, who could make idols, they started residing over here. In fact, in Bengali language, Kumartuli translates to the locality of potters. So this is a historic tradition which is directly linked to the culture of Kolkata and the larger Bengali culture, which is tagged to the Durga festival. I hope you know that the Durga festival has been provided the UNESCO tag in 2022. It has been listed under UNESCO's list of cultural heritage, intangible cultural heritage on humanity. It recognizes those cultural traits and practices and customs, right, which are intangible. You can't measure the value. You can't you can't physically quantify the value of such cultural heritage. UNESCO has a World Heritage Site program where you have quantifiable sites like natural sites, cultural sites, etc. Right, from Taj Mahal to the Hampi temples and to many natural sites which are quantifiable. They are tangible. But there are many cultural aspects in every culture which is part of the civilizational heritage, which is intangible, like the Durga festival in West Bengal. Right? Durga festival is also celebrated widely from Odisha to Assam to even Bangladesh. So it was listed on the UNESCO intangible list of cultural heritage on humanity, and it was supposed to benefit the idol makers in Kumartuli. These clay idol makers, the potters, they are the ones who make these beautiful Durga goddess idols, which you see during the Durga festival. The article is talking about the debt, the suffering of the idol makers. Their livelihoods have not improved despite the critical role they play in Bengali culture. Right? The government has not been concerned about their well-being. Most idol makers and potters, they have fallen into a debt burden. So it's talking about the struggles of the sculptors and clay workers. So please note the importance of Kumartuli and its association with the Durga festival. So that is what you need to know from this article. Next, on page 14, The article says the European Union has established a dedicated AI office to implement the AI Act that was adopted last year. In 2023, European Union became the first governmental entity to adopt a AI legislation. Is that clear? The EU has adopted a AI Act to regulate all forms of artificial intelligence. It has categorized AI technologies into different risk categories, from very high risk to low risk categories. And different set of regulations apply on these AI tools and technologies which are under development. So EU is looking at regulating AI technologies and the risks associated with it, be it a risk to fundamental rights, human rights, democratic rights, or risk to the economy, risk to one's privacy. So all such risks are regulated, handled under the AI Act. In fact, certain very high-risk AI technologies are even prohibited for development. Private companies cannot develop certain prohibited AI technologies within the EU market. Certain high-risk, medium-risk technologies are tightly regulated. And essentially, to enforce this law, a dedicated office has been set up at the headquarters of European Union, which is in Brussels, in Belgium. So that's a very important development because EU is leading the world as of now when it comes to regulation of AI. If you look at India, for example, we are yet to come out with a regulatory policy on AI. Right? We have not even contemplated an AI Act. But EU has already enacted a law last year. Now it has set up a dedicated office to enforce the regulations as well. Next, on the same page, there's a small update regarding China's diplomacy and the different strategies it uses in its diplomacy. This picture on page 14 refers to China's Panda diplomacy. You can see the giant pandas here. These cute animals, right, they're native to China, and China leverages this in its diplomacy. Since many years, China has been gifting baby pandas to other countries to build a soft power-based relationship. So China has a history of gifting the pandas to some European countries. It has gifted pandas to Russia, Japan, South Korea, and it has gifted these pandas to the United States as well. A few years ago, China had gifted few pandas to the Smithsonian National Zoo at Washington, D.C. But after the US-China tensions increased, especially under Donald Trump, the US had returned the pandas back to China. But now, as China-US are trying to reset the relationship, China has again started its panda diplomacy, and it is gifting two baby pandas to the same zoo in Washington to build a soft power-based relationship based on the donation of these giant panda cubs to the United States. This is similar to, let's say, cricket diplomacy between India and Pakistan, or the mango diplomacy of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Bangladeshi PM Sheikh Hasina is known to gift the unique Bangladeshi mangoes to leaders around the world, especially to India's Prime Minister, repeatedly every year. And it's a mark of friendship, a gesture, a symbolic gesture, right, as a soft power tool on which you can build relations between two partner countries. So China engages in such panda diplomacy by gifting giant panda cubs to other countries. Coming to the last article, on the last page of the Science and Tech edition, there's an article referring to the Magellan spacecraft of NASA, which was launched in the 1990s. I know it's an old topic, but it can still be relevant because there are some new findings based on the data collected by the Magellan spacecraft launched by NASA. This spacecraft was meant to study the surface of Venus. It explored and studied the surface of Venus. It brought back a lot of scientific data. The radars it was equipped with. It collected a lot of images of the surface of Venus. As you know, Venus is inhospitable. It's not suitable for any life to exist. But the Magellan spacecraft, which orbited Venus from 1990 to 1992, had brought up a lot of valuable imagery data which is still being studied and analyzed. And new studies has shown evidence of lava flows and large-scale volcanic activity, which basically overrides our previous understanding of Venus. The study has confirmed that Venus apparently reports much more volcanism than previously understood. So this changes the very understanding of our neighboring planet. So it's a key finding which has been brought out through a recent study based on the radar images collected by Magellan spacecraft of NASA in the 1990s. So that is one last update, and on this note, I would like to conclude the Hindu analysis for today. So I hope it's been a good session. I hope you guys have understood all the topics. If you did, please press the like button. Let me know what you think through the comments, and do share the videos with other aspirants, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. I'll see you tomorrow, and don't forget to tune in to our channel at 1 p.m. again, because we are going to analyze the second mock test paper from 1 p.m. onwards. So that is it. Take care. Have a good day.